like not together, you know, like we didn't ride in together and like break each other's hair or anything, but we were in the same community units. So essentially, when we talk about things like arming teachers, what we should be asking ourselves along with that is what risks are we asking our children to take when they're in classrooms with armed teachers? Because we're talking about civilians here. In the same way that I would not ask the deputy chief here to take my 9-year-old on a ride-along on any assignment that he did, I'm not going to ask my 9-year-old school teacher to be a law enforcement officer. So that's one of those things that we have to balance this out in a way that is fair to everyone socially. Like I said, our organization does support the rights of a law-abiding Texan or American to carry a firearm. That's something that every person should be able to decide for themselves. But we all have the accountability of if you abuse your domestic partner, you're going to lose that right. If you commit a violent felony, you're going to lose that right. And that is where the responsibility comes in. We are each individually accountable for our actions, and the actions that we make have consequences.
I don't really have much to add. I agree with all of you on that question. I think that's what we're trying to do right now. Currently is figuring out how do we enforce current firearm laws while also protecting, the right for your Second Amendment. So I think it's just, I think one important part of it is you guys mentioned accountability of people who are doing something wrong, but also having this dialogue. It doesn't happen hardly ever, definitely not enough to have people with different viewpoints and different experiences coming together to talk about how do we address this issue. So I think one part of balancing those two rights are having people come together and talk about it in a common sense way, and not just surrounding yourself by people who agree with you on the issue, because it is a complex issue. So I think dialogue like this definitely helps try to come up with ways to balance those rights.
Liz, do we have any questions?
We do.
Okay, do you want to read one?
One question we have from the audience, specifically directed to Dr. Patrick. Could you please discuss any research or statistics that specifically addresses the number of lives saved by the defensive use of firearms?
Do you mean, so used in self-defense in like domestic violence, is that what you said, in abuse?
That's my question. I was more responding to actually all of them. I only saw negative sides of firearm harm. According to the CDC, 500,000 to
Okay, we're not going to do any, the audience is not talking, so that's the question. That's okay.
I would assume directed. I would assume directed by, domestic violence.
Sure. So that's actually, currently one issue that people are kind of debating on. There's, we have laws that can prohibit someone who commits domestic violence from having a firearm. But more states, Kentucky, where I came from before this, was one of them, where it makes it easier. You can get an expedited prosecuted concealed carry license if you go and seek a protective order. So basically trying to encourage people experiencing domestic violence to obtain a firearm for self-protection. There's actually not a really good research study that I can cite that says is that a good idea or not. It's kind of something that people are trying to look at. One thing I would say in my experience with my research, I think it just it depends on the situation. I think for some people, some victims, that might be the only thing that keeps them and their family safe. We talked about if someone wants to kill you, and it happens in these situations, they're going to kill you. You can take away someone's gun, he'll run over with the car. So I think in certain situations, having a firearm might protect someone's life or their children's life, but I do think the last thing we should be doing is throwing guns in the hands of people who don't know how to use them, who are scared, who are traumatized, and that gun could be taken and turned on them, or they could end up, killing someone, because when you pull out a gun, you can be prepared that could happen. And the other thing to think of are the legal ramifications and how we define justifiable homicide. And that can really depend on the state. It can depend on where you are and the situation. I worked on a fatality review of intimate partner homicides in Kentucky, and of the 9 cases where a female killed the male partner, in all 9 cases there was a history of domestic violence. It was said it was done in self-defense. Only 1 person was acquitted. So I think that there's also what is a justifiable homicide, especially the more you know the victim and offender know each other, it can be difficult in determining that. So basically, there's not a great answer, but I wouldn't say the blanket statement is no, we shouldn't be giving, victims of domestic violence shouldn't be arming themselves. Absolutely not. That if firearms are a part of your safety plan, then I would say that you should do the training, be familiar with it, and just make sure you're responsible.
So this is another question from the audience. So we're not under threat of colonization from a well-regulated militia. We haven't been for almost 250 years since the Revolutionary War. Why are people not discussing the common sense solution of repealing the provisions of the Second Amendment that guarantee gun ownership now that it is neither necessary nor relevant? Thoughts?
I could go first. Am I on? Hello? There we go. Well, first of all, the Second Amendment can be repealed all day long, but that doesn't change the right to keep and bear arms. All the Second Amendment does is it prevents the government from infringing on that right, and it tells the government, which is what the Constitution is, not to touch that inalienable right that already existed. So repealing the Second Amendment isn't going to solve anything. It's just going to create more problems because it's not restraining the government, and the people in the government are now going to have more issues. But this is already actually even in established case law. The courts have already established that the Second Amendment did not confer any rights, just like the First Amendment did not confer any rights. It simply recognized them. So abolishing the Second Amendment isn't even really a question, or shouldn't be, I guess, in my opinion, about trying to solve these issues.
So I don't claim to be a constitutional scholar. I'm literally the parent of a 9-year-old. I'm a volunteer, and they, quite frankly, I don't have enough hours in the day to do that. But I will say this. We know that there is an estimated 350 to 400 million guns in the U.S. So we can point to other countries all day long, which we do. And we say, well, New Zealand. Well, New Zealand has an estimated 1.2 million guns total for the entire country. So that's like saying San Antonio. I mean, if we want to, like San Antonio and Houston put together. So you really have to take into account the breadth of the issue. So we can make a statement and we can say, wouldn't it be great? But realistically, it's just not feasible. And frankly, if you think about the fact that it is a constitutionally protected right, all we're going to do with that kind of push is further polarize the different sides of the issue. And what we should be doing at this point is finding solutions together.
Okay, I got one question from
audience member, and I'll just read it also. It says, how do you count the effects of the Dickey Amendment, which prohibits the CDC from researching gun violence?
Any of the panelists? No, that's for anybody, or all of you.
Well, I'll just really quick agree that I think there are plenty of organizations out there that can do this. There are private entities that already do this. Whether government does it or not, I think, is kind of irrelevant these days in modern society, because you have, there's research going on all over the place in universities all across the country, as well as specialists like Gary Click and John Lott and many others.
Yeah, I mean, I don't, of course, I don't support prohibiting any form of research. I mean, that's what we should be doing. We should be, and being prepared. I think it obviously having it funded from what we hope is a nonpartisan entity like, the government, the CDC, because the findings are the findings, and it might bode well in some, for some people, and then for others, it might go against what you think. So I think, of course, I'm obviously opposed to prohibiting any type of research that is warranted, especially when we're looking at issues in the U.S. where we are seeing you know, the numbers we're seeing. But I think that we should always be, you know, we're asking questions as researchers in an objective way, and not looking for certain answers, and we're not looking for a certain finding, we're not looking to make a certain conclusion. But I thought that was gone, they were lifting that.
I think it was overturned.
It was overturned, yeah.
It was
So,
overturned last year.
yeah,
So the difference is, it's been overturned, but the government's still not funding research.
yeah.
And so we do also need to take into account that all the universities and educational institutions that are doing the research, or who ideally would be doing the research, they do rely heavily on funding from the government. So, and a lot of times when you have a independent institution or organization doing research, there are usually a lot of cries that the research is in some way skewed. So I know that every town does a lot of research, and a lot of times our findings are nonpartisan and they are impartial, but that's not always how they're received.
Did you have something?
We have time for one more? A quick one? Yeah.
I don't think this is going
Oh.
to.
That was 3 minutes, so.
I'll try.
Uh,
So we've got multiple questions from Twitter, Facebook, and from a student who wrote this down, and they're all pretty similar in terms of the question of how should we change our gun laws to increase safety? So including things like looking at other countries that have lower deaths, or looking at in-home background checks. So not in-home background checks, but in-home checks, like some places do. Some places require getting it done before purchase, or taking a class before purchase, practicing using the weapon before purchase. So how can we, what can we make changes that could increase safety?
So like one quick idea from each?
Sure, that's why I said it's not really that.
So I guess quickly, I think just even closing the loopholes on some of the existing laws, I think requiring a background check, or, permit to purchase, judging by existing research, and I think just using common sense, I think that would be one effective way without having to introduce new legislation.
I'm going to agree with that. Background checks are the first line of defense. So closing the Charleston loophole, which is if a background check is not returned within 72 hours, the federally licensed firearms dealer can proceed with the purchase even if the check has not come back. That's in existence, and they are trying to extend that. So instead of 72 hours, I believe it would be 9 days now, or 10 days. That was proposed. And also closing the boyfriend loophole. So federal law prohibits domestic abusers from, convicted domestic abusers from purchasing a firearm. However, they don't include dating partners, only persons who cohabitate, share a child, or are married. So if you are a boyfriend-girlfriend or boyfriend-boyfriend or girlfriend-girlfriend situation, and you are convicted of misdemeanor domestic violence, there is not a federal law that prohibits purchase. So here in Texas, we do have that law, and also I would like to add that the Bexar County Sheriff's Office has done exemplary work with domestic violence and preventing domestic violence, gun violence. So it's within their rights to go ahead and remove guns from the home of somebody who is convicted of misdemeanor domestic violence. However, there wasn't really a mechanism in place to do so. Sheriff Salazar this past year did implement that policy so that if a person is convicted, the guns are actually removed from the home. They aren't just told you can't have it. The sheriff's office is actually requiring that they turn them in or that they are removed. So we would like to thank them for that.
As with anything, prior to seeking out a weapon or such, you should do your research, as we've discussed before, and know the accountability risks in getting a firearm. If you know of somebody that's in a domestic violence situation and their counterpart does have a weapon or a firearm, help them do the research on how to dismantle that maybe. If you remove a weapon from somewhere, that may set something off. But if you're able to take something that will dismantle that weapon from hurting you, that may be an option. These are silent options that you can take to help yourself survive, which may give you the time you need to get out. So with anything, just do your research and know there's accountability either way. But there's also so many avenues, and with the internet today, you can just reach out and find an answer. You can find an answer, find a video, find something, you can find plenty of help. So the help is out there, just to reach out and seek it.
So this might sound a bit backwards, but I think the answer to that question on training is to pass constitutional carry. And here's where I get that from. The Gun Violence Policy Center just came out with a study that said that when states went to unlicensed carry, more people actually sought out training, and that training was more practical. So right now, if you go get a license to carry through the government, all you're going to be taught is the laws. But when people aren't required to get that license, they actually go out and get more practical training on how to use a firearm safely and effectively. And so the fact that in the last 6 years, the number of constitutional carry states has increased from 5 to 16, and yet violent crime still continues to drop nationally, I think goes towards this. And that study that just came out by John Lott shows that more people get training when they don't have to get a license to do so.
The next floor will end. So if you give a round of applause for all our panelists. Thank you for coming. Have a great day.
Thank you all, sir. Appreciate your time.
Thank you. Appreciate your service.
Thank you, sir. You too. The military.
Thank you. Becca, I don't know why I forgot your first name.
That's okay.
I kept wanting to say Amy. I'm like, I am not going to say Amy.
Well, I mean, usually it's mom, hey mom.
Oh, it doesn't mean that the 27 and 20-year-old daughter.
Yeah, I've got 20, 23, and 21. Oh, fun.
He